5 years ago, if you asked almost anyone about JRPGs, you'd probably hear the same answer. They're outdated, they're too slow, turn-based combat is dead, open worlds and action games are the future. And honestly, for a while, it really felt like that was true. Every major publisher seemed obsessed with making bigger maps, faster combat, and endless live service experiences. If a game didn't have hundreds of hours of content or constant updates, people assumed it couldn't compete. JRPGs slowly disappeared from the spotlight. They didn't disappear completely, but they stopped being the center of the conversation. Then something strange happened. Without making a lot of noise, they started coming back. Not because they copied modern trends, they came back because they embraced exactly what made them special in the first place. And today, some of the most talked about RPGs in the world are turn-based games. Think about that for a second. A few years ago, saying that would have sounded crazy. So what changed? Why are millions of players suddenly excited about games that many people once called old-fashioned? And maybe the biggest question of all, were JRPGs ever really dying, or were we simply looking in the wrong direction? Because when you start connecting the dots between Persona, Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, Dragon Quest, Final Fantasy Resonance, and even the new generation of RPG developers, a much bigger story begins to appear. This isn't just about nostalgia. This isn't just about one successful game. This is about an entire genre finding its identity again. And once you see the pattern, it's almost impossible to ignore it. But to understand why JRPGs are suddenly everywhere again, we first need to go back to the moment when almost everyone thought they were finished. Around the middle of the last decade, the gaming industry had one clear obsession. Bigger meant better. Every publisher wanted the next massive open world. Every RPG wanted real-time combat. Every game wanted to keep players online for hundreds of hours. It almost felt like the entire industry was chasing the same formula. Western RPGs were dominating the conversation. Games like The Witcher 3, Skyrim, and later Baldur's Gate 3 showed players enormous worlds where every decision mattered. At the same time, action RPGs became the new standard. Even legendary Japanese franchises started changing. Final Fantasy XV completely abandoned traditional turn-based combat. Final Fantasy XVI pushed even further into full action combat. Those games were successful, but they also created a strange feeling among longtime JRPG fans. It almost looked like developers themselves had started believing that classic turn-based gameplay wasn't good enough anymore. Then there was another problem: perception. Turn-based games were suddenly labeled as old, slow, outdated. People confused simplicity with bad design. But that's the funny thing about trends. They don't always reflect what players actually want. Sometimes they only reflect what publishers think players want. While everyone was chasing bigger maps and cinematic action, another group of developers was quietly asking a different question. What if turn-based combat wasn't the problem? What if nobody had simply evolved it? That question would eventually change everything. Because while the industry was busy running toward the future, a few studios decided to look back. Not to copy the past, but to understand why people fell in love with JRPGs in the first place. And one franchise, more than any other, proved there was still an enormous audience waiting. Persona didn't just sell millions of copies, it completely changed the conversation around modern JRPGs. And that's where this comeback really begins. So what changed? Honestly, it wasn't just one game. It was a series of moments that slowly changed how players looked at JRPGs again. And the first major turning point was Persona 5. Before Persona 5, people enjoyed JRPGs, but they weren't dominating conversations outside the hardcore community. Then Atlus released a game that looked stylish, sounded incredible, and somehow made turn-based combat feel cooler than ever. Every menu animation, every battle transition, every soundtrack made players realize something. Turn-based combat didn't have to feel old. It could feel fast, dynamic, and exciting. Persona 5 didn't simply sell millions of copies, it completely changed the perception of what a modern JRPG could be. Then another trend started appearing. Instead of trying to imitate Western RPGs, Japanese developers began embracing what made them unique. Octopath Traveler proved that pixel art wasn't outdated. HD 2D wasn't just nostalgia, it was an art style capable of creating some of the most beautiful worlds in modern gaming. Suddenly, players weren't asking for every RPG to look realistic anymore. They wanted personality, they wanted style, they wanted games with identity. Then came Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, and I honestly think this is one of the biggest moments in recent JRPG history. Here was a brand new studio making a high-budget turn-based RPG at a time when many people believed AAA developers had abandoned the genre. The combat mixed classic turns with dodges, parries, and real-time mechanics. It respected traditional JRPG design while making every battle feel active and intense. The game became a massive success and proved something the industry had forgotten. Players never stopped loving turn-based combat. They simply wanted developers to evolve it. Even more interesting, the director of Final Fantasy Resonance recently explained that this new wave exists because the people creating today's RPGs grew up playing Final Fantasy, Persona, Dragon Quest, and other classic JRPGs. They're not copying those games, they're building on them with modern technology and fresh ideas. Then Square Enix made a decision that almost nobody expected. Instead of moving even further toward action combat, they announced Final Fantasy Resonance, a brand new HD 2D Final Fantasy with classic turn-based battles. That isn't just another game announcement, it's one of the clearest signs that one of the biggest RPG companies in the world believes players still want these experiences. And once you start seeing all these pieces together, you realize something incredible. This isn't nostalgia anymore. This is a new generation redefining what JRPGs can become. But that still leaves one important question. Why are players connecting with these games again after so many years? I actually don't think the comeback happened because JRPGs changed. I think it happened because players changed. Think about the last few years. We've spent hundreds of hours exploring massive open worlds filled with icons, collectibles, crafting systems, battle passes, seasonal content, and endless checklists. At first it felt exciting. Eventually it started feeling exhausting. Bigger doesn't always mean better. Sometimes bigger just means longer. That's where JRPGs quietly found their place again. They don't try to let you become anyone. Instead, they introduce unforgettable characters and ask you to experience their story. That's a completely different philosophy. Instead of creating your own hero, you travel alongside characters who already have fears, dreams, and personalities. And because those stories are usually more focused, developers can create emotional moments that stay with you for years. Interestingly, Guillaume Bruch, the director of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, recently explained that he prefers the more linear storytelling of JRPGs because it allows for stronger narratives and far more memorable characters than many open-ended Western RPGs. Then there's the music. Few genres understand emotional soundtracks like JRPGs. Whether it's Final Fantasy, Persona, Nier, Xenoblade, or Dragon Quest, the music doesn't simply play in the background. It becomes part of the memories players keep for years. And then we have progression. Every new party member feels important. Every new skill actually changes how you approach combat. Every boss feels like a real obstacle instead of another enemy with a larger health bar. Even visually, JRPGs stopped chasing realism. Games like Octopath Traveler and Final Fantasy Resonance prove that incredible art direction often ages much better than cutting-edge graphics. HD 2D isn't successful because it's retro. It's successful because it creates worlds that feel timeless. The funny thing is that none of these ideas are actually new. Strong stories, memorable characters, strategic combat, and unforgettable music have always been the foundation of great JRPGs. Maybe players simply reached a point where they started appreciating those strengths again. And if that's true, then the future of the genre might be even brighter than we think. Because when you look at what's coming next, it feels like this comeback is only getting started. So where do JRPGs go from here? Honestly, I don't think this comeback has even reached its peak. If you look at what's happening right now, the next few years might become one of the strongest eras the genre has ever experienced. Persona 6 is one of the most anticipated RPGs in the industry. Dragon Quest continues proving that classic design still has a place in modern gaming. Fire Emblem keeps evolving its strategy formula while bringing new players into the genre. Digimon's story, Time Stranger, reminded everyone that even franchises outside the spotlight can deliver deep and rewarding JRPG experiences. And then there's Final Fantasy Resonance. I don't think people realize how important that game actually is. Square Enix could have continued pushing every new Final Fantasy toward full action combat. Instead, they decided to build an entirely new mainline experience around HD 2D visuals and classic turn-based gameplay. That's not nostalgia, that's confidence. It shows that one of the biggest RPG publishers in the world believes there is still a huge audience looking for these experiences. Recent comments from the game's leadership make that even clearer. They openly credit the success of Clair Obscur, Expedition 33, and this new generation of creators who grew up loving JRPGs as proof that turn-based games still have a bright future. Then look at Nintendo. Switch 2 is creating an ecosystem where JRPGs can thrive even more. Historically, Nintendo platforms have always been a home for long single-player adventures, and the upcoming lineup already includes major RPG franchises alongside brand new projects. What's interesting is that these games aren't competing with each other, they're feeding each other's success. Someone finishes Persona and becomes interested in Metaphor. Someone plays Clair Obscur and decides to try Dragon Quest. Someone discovers HD 2D through Octopath Traveler and suddenly Final Fantasy Resonance becomes a day-one purchase. That's how genres grow. They don't survive because of one masterpiece. They survive because great games create curiosity for more great games. And that's exactly what's happening right now. For the first time in years, JRPG fans aren't asking if the genre is alive, they're asking which incredible RPG they're going to play next. But maybe the biggest lesson isn't about JRPGs at all. Maybe it's about the entire gaming industry. Maybe the biggest mistake we made was assuming every genre had to evolve in exactly the same direction. For years, the industry treated bigger worlds, faster combat, and endless live service content as the only path forward. And don't get me wrong, some of those games are incredible. But somewhere along the way, many players realized they were missing something. They missed memorable characters. They missed stories with a clear beginning and end. They missed strategic battles where every decision mattered. They missed soundtracks that stayed with them long after the credits rolled. JRPGs didn't suddenly invent those things. They've always been there. What changed is that players started appreciating them again, and developers stopped being afraid to build games around those strengths. That's why I don't think we're watching a comeback. I think we're watching a new golden age. A generation of developers who grew up playing Final Fantasy, Persona, Chrono Trigger, Dragon Quest, and Xenogears is now creating the games they always dreamed of making. And honestly, that's one of the most exciting things happening in gaming today. Because if this is only the beginning, imagine where the genre could be 5 years from now. Maybe JRPGs never died. Maybe we just forgot why we loved them. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think we're living through the greatest JRPG revival ever? Or do you believe the genre never really disappeared? Let me know in the comments because I genuinely love to read your opinions. And if you enjoy gaming news, game analysis, and the biggest upcoming releases every week, subscribe to LootVerse and don't miss what's next. Follow for more JRPG content and gaming updates.